Honestly, it's probably how I feel about certain couples. I would say off the rip, Daniel Craig and Rachel Weisz. Like, I am definitely trying to be a third up in there. I am. I'm trying to slip
Oh,
right up in there, and be like,
mhm.
hey. And my stance right now is a fuck no in general because people are weird. But them too, yes, I'll be
There are
like,
exceptions.
yes, I'll be like, for one night, I'll do it.
Exactly. Just something to write in your next memoir for sure.
Right.
What's up, my bis and allies, and welcome back to another episode of Bisexual Behavior. I'm your host, Talia Cass, and I've got another great episode for you. I know I say that every month, but I'm so excited for this interview. I got to talk to Clarkisha Kent. She is a writer, culture critic, and author of Fat On, Fat Off, a Big Bitch Manifesto. We had such a great conversation. We talked about what it means to have thoughtful representation in media, the effects of fatphobia, and Clarkisha's experience as a bisexual, disabled, Black African woman. And her book in the audio version is actually available now, so you can get it wherever you get books, Amazon, independent stores. I highly recommend. I loved her book. So we did have some technical issues with this interview. At one point, one of us lost Wi-Fi, so the interview cut off about 10 minutes early, which isn't a big deal. You still get the bulk of the interview, and it's amazing. But keep listening because I actually got a really inspiring story from a listener about coming out as bisexual to everyone but his gay father. I wanted to share it because it's a powerful example of biphobia coming from all sides and how religion can play a big factor in someone's coming out journey. And I just thought a lot of you could relate to it. And again, I love hearing from listeners. So if you have any stories you want to share, feel free to email at bisexualbehaviorpod@gmail.com. But again, keep listening. That will be toward the end of the episode. And yeah, so I'm so excited to share this one with you. But without further ado, here's Clarkisha. Clarkisha, welcome to Bisexual Behavior.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Talia.
Oh, of course. I'm so excited to have you. As I was saying before, I love your book. The audiobook just went on sale as well. So anybody who's listening can go ahead and purchase your book. But we'll dive into that and talk a lot more about that. But first, I just want to get some introductions going just so everyone knows, who we are. So feel free to follow my format. My name is Talia. My pronouns are she, her. I am bisexual and cis and white. What about you?
So I'm Clarkisha Kent. Pronouns are also she, her, hers. I am Black, specifically Nigerian American. Shout out to us. And I am bisexual and also demisexual.
Nice. So, for listeners who are unaware, because we talk a lot about bisexuality, could you explain a little bit about what demisexuality is for those who
Okay,
aren't aware?
so I'm gonna be honest to all the gays out there. I am a wayward gay a lot of times, so sometimes these definitions be fluctuating for even me. But my understanding of demisexuality, as I illustrate in my book as well, is that there has to be some sort of like intense like emotional connection. Like for me, I really have to be like vibing with you for me to feel any like legitimate like sexual like feelings for you. I can agree that someone is, aesthetically hot. Like I can recognize when someone is attractive. But if they were to come up to me and be like, let's do something, I'd be like, no, I don't know you like that. I don't know you like that. So yeah, that's kind
No,
of
that
my
makes sense.
mind. Yeah, like I don't know you like that. Sorry.
I've heard a lot of people using demisexual a lot more recently, and I feel like it's becoming a lot more common. And just like it really makes sense. Like it's not like you necessarily want to jump the bones of someone that you don't know at all. So I feel like it really does make sense. It's so listeners, if you're unaware, I definitely recommend you research it. It might be something that resonates with you. So thank you for sharing that. But
Of course.
before we get started, you are a published writer. You just
Yeah.
released a memoir, and I want to talk about that. So do you want to just give like a quick like synopsis of the book and where you can find it?
Yes. So, Fat Off, Fat On is for me, it is my story, right? Clarkisha's story, but also it's a story about like collective stories, I should say, a collection of stories about how truly sinister fat phobia is in particular. in the fact that it's not like simple name calling like people like to think. That's a very elementary understanding of fatphobia. Fatphobia is a very sophisticated oppressive system, just like racism, just like misogyny, homophobia, transphobia. It's very sophisticated and it evolves and transforms just like system of oppressions do. So I wanted to use my personal story to really run the through line through that. Because, people don't like to be talked at. And sometimes you throw too much verbiage and terms and definitions at people. Sometimes people's ears start closing. That's not necessarily right, but, you got to meet people where they're at. So that's kind of
So
what my
true.
story is about. And through my story, I tackle, fat phobia and its connection to purity culture, its connection to homophobia, its connection to racism, misogyny, colorism, texturism, everything. It touches everything. So I wanted to use my stories to kind of highlight that connection. With Feminist Press, that's who published the book, shout out to them and my editor, especially Miss Lauren Rosemary Hook. You can also try to get it from like indie shops because we don't really want to give Amazon money. But, if you're positioned where
That's
you
right.
can, I get it. I understand. I ain't gonna judge you. But, try if it's possible, try the indie shops first.
Definitely. And one thing I really love about your book is that you talk about a lot of the intersectionalities between, fat phobia and how it ties in with racism and especially homophobia. So we'll definitely talk a lot more about that. But one of the first themes that you started talking about, you open in your book talking about how you love Scrubs. And you specifically talk about Dr. Cox, who was one of my favorite characters as well. And you were saying, it would have been so great to just have a Black version of Dr. Cox. And then you go into talking about how, representation isn't great if you're just putting different faces on there and different races, that there's a lot
Absolutely.
more to having really accurate and good representation. And I wanted to ask you, what goes into having really great ideal representation? And then if you want to talk a little bit about the Kent test, which you created, which is really awesome. So
Thank you.
yeah.
So good representation is very tricky. People hear the word good and they try to start assigning like morality to it. So now, like, if you go look at like the newer versions of my test, right, you'll see that I changed good to like thoughtful. And I thought it was like important to make that distinction because there's like for you to have thoughtful representation of a character. Like if you're thinking about, really strong characters in general, some of these more popular characters, like let me throw out like IDK, Darth Vader. Like we know he's a villain, right? But like people really love that character, because he's been built up in a way that's not necessarily good, right? But very, very complex. And that's kind of like characters like him and others is what I think about when I think about like very thoughtful or thorough representation. We're not asking for this person to be good necessarily, but when you're designing this character, like I want to know that you put like actual work to bring this character to screen, and it's not like this one dimensional projection of your own like biases onto like a TV screen, or film screen. Because, audiences are smarter than people think. So a lot of the times we can like look at certain characters and really see like the biases or the bigotries, right, of the creator, like just on screen, and they just think we don't notice, and it's weird. But yeah, for me, when I think about good representation, I'm thinking about characters that you give a fuck about because the way that they've been written has been very thorough. So even if you don't personally fuck with that character, like you don't care for their politics, da 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 da, like this is still to you, like, you know what? But they still ate. Like they really wrote this character out. And that's kind of what I want for other characters, especially if they happen to be marginalized. I consider it very, bigotry aside, I consider it very lazy, like very lazy work when I'm seeing a character that's just like, we just didn't try. Not only is your bigotry shown, but you also just didn't try. So that's kind of what I think about when I mean good representation. And then for the Kent test, I would love to discuss. Are there any specific questions you wanted to ask, or do you want me to just kind of go off the rip about the Kent test?
Oh, go off the riff. Yeah, give an overview. I'd also love to hear, any particular media that you think was really thoughtful in their representation and that scored very high in the Kent test as well.
Okay, well, let me pull up the Kent test because even sometimes I myself need a refresher. So off the rip though, the Kent test is like a media limits test that is designed to determine whether a film or any other piece of media has provided the audience with thoughtful representation of Black women and or women of color. Again, this is like a jump off point. Like, it's not supposed to be the be all end all for media criticism. I would never claim to have all of those answers because I can't do that. No, I don't know that much. Still learning like everyone else. But yeah, it's a test that was designed to really kind of put some of these characters, if you're a Black woman or a woman of color, put some of these characters under the microscope so we can really see, like I mentioned, how much of your biases are coming into play when you're writing these characters. And the most important thing about this test for me is that I made sure it wasn't a pass or fail thing. When people bring up, obviously the Bechdel test is a predecessor, right? And when people bring up
Right.
that test, they always harp on the pass or fail option because people's egos can't handle being called failures. So for me, when
True.
I was when I was making, because they hear that and then they stop listening, because people are shallow.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're shallow like that. So for the Kent test, I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna go in that route because I know how people could be. So we'll put it on a scale. We'll put it on a scale so that like you can really kind of see in real time where you are. So if you get a 0, then yes, you failed. Like what? Like you can see it's a 0. It's a 0%.
Like, you should feel
But
bad at that point.
right, yeah, because you had like 8 to 10 points to do better. You got 0. That's bad, right? But when you're getting, let's say you get like a 4 or a 5, you could be like, okay, like I'm on the right track, but clearly it's some stuff I have to sit down and unlearn because my biases have stopped me from getting that 7 or that 8 or whatever. I think a good example for me in terms of stuff that's passed or not passed or maybe got this score or that score is I was doing for a while. Twitter had this program for creators where it was like the Twitter Spaces thing. It was like the thing that like made Spaces like popular. They plucked a couple of us who either who are verified, right? Let's be honest about that, who are verified or had like some specific knowledge in their field to lead these like spaces. So we had a whole program for like couple months. And for me, I decided to do like Kent test space. So I was like, in these spaces, we'll talk about media who passes, who doesn't pass, who like gets it right, kind of, that kind of thing. So in these spaces, at some point, I discussed The Witcher. So we had the first and the second season. First season was not a failure, but it was like that it was stuff that they did that was good, and then the stuff that they did was very questionable. So I think the first season got like a 4 or 5. It was like middle of the road, a middle of the road score on the test. And then their second season, they came back, and that second season I think was like a 7 or 8, like it's much higher. So I think they listened to the criticisms of like the general audience, and then they tried to like do better. I know there are people out there who rightfully have a lot of issues with The Witcher and how it's played out in the adaptation because there are people who play the games. They're like, and I'm like, I get it, I do. But personally, if I'm just judging by like what I've seen on TV, I would say that season 2 was an improvement. But obviously, take that as a grain of salt because I haven't played the games, so I'll be honest
Yeah,
about that.
right. I haven't
But
either. I've been wanting to watch the show. I heard it's good, so
yeah.
that's
So
encouraging.
those are examples for things that pass the Kent test off the rip. Widows, love that movie. Y'all should watch it. Criminally underrated. They did not do the promo justice. They tried to go like high prestige with the ads, and I'm like, this is a fucking heist movie. Just say that it's a heist movie. It's okay. I love a good heist movie. Like,
Who doesn't?
like you like stating the actual genre it is not going to take away from the movie. The movie's still great. But yeah, Widows off the rip. Black Panther 1. Black Panther actually came out. Was it 20? When did this test come out? Was it 28, 2016, 20? I'm sorry, time is now a flat circle.
It
But
really is.
yeah, by the time the test came out, I think I had been kind of like really obsessed with Black Panther, but I don't remember exactly. I got to go back and look at those dates. But yeah, it was still one of the first movies I tested on it. So yeah, Black Panther, um yeah, Black Panther, Widows. I think if I remember correctly, I think Invincible also scored pretty high. I couldn't give it all of the points because I didn't like how they treated Amber. But if we're talking about Mark's mom, like the principal character's mother, in that show, I think Debbie was a really great female character in that show. So I think that did pretty well. There's a couple other examples, but if people are interested, I started grading some movies on my website. So you can actually go to my website, www.clarkisha.com, and then you'll see like the Kent Test tab. And there are movies that I have rated, so you can actually go through and click through. Some of them I was able to link the like testing that I did. Some of them I wasn't, but
Cool. Yeah, I'll include that in the show notes as well. So you must be every time you watch something, are you like in your head like kind of doing your own Kent test, even if you weren't planning on initially doing that?
yes, I definitely am. It's unfortunately something I can't technically turn off.
Yeah, I
But
can imagine.
yes, like when you're media trained in terms of like media analysis is not something that you can just. But that said, depending on the project and where it's coming from, I'll still I'll still enjoy it while like having those notes in my head. But yeah, it's definitely tough, definitely tough.
How do you think it would have affected you if you saw better representation growing up in general?
Oh, I think that a lot of the BS that I went through, even personally, I might not have as readily tolerated. I think people
Right.
really underestimate the influence that like good and thoughtful representation can have on like the individual person. I think people always want to assume they really believe that they can't be easily influenced or brainwashed or whatever. And I'm like, baby, I got some news for you. You are not as special as you think.
You're
Like
influenced every day.
thank you, right? So I think that's my thing. I feel like, if yeah, if people really understood the propaganda part of media, they might be a little bit more concerned than they actually are. I think
Like
that's why.
even outs
Yes,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
No, so that's why I quote bell hooks a lot in my book, because she, as a media critic herself, like she really does a lot to keep going back to the fact that a lot of these films, a lot of these movies are propaganda arms for this country. But people don't want to think about that. Like, for example, I love the original Top Gun. I get it. That is a propaganda film through and through. No, people
Oh
are
my
like,
god.
oh, well, I don't want to hear that. It's just the planes and the explosions and And I'm like, I get it, I get it, I get it. Well, again, we should be thinking
You can
about these
enjoy it but
things.
also criticize it and
Yeah,
like
we should be thinking
hope that
about
it
these
can be
things.
better. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but people don't want to do that second part. Like, I enjoy it, therefore it's not bad. And I'm like, again, I have news for you. So,
Notice even like seeing movies from when we were growing up, like I feel like the way that they bashed characters for their weight and just the fat phobia that was just embedded into every single movie that you see, and just like how that fed into like diet culture and beauty products and how you're sold things to make yourself feel better about what you just saw on this show that just told you that you're fat. And it's just like I feel like they're trying to be better about it now, but I feel like it's still, there's so much harmful like fat phobia that's happening to this day. Even like they're using it in wellness culture as well. So it's just interesting that you're talking about like criticizing media, and I think it's so easy for us all to be influenced, but I think it's important for everyone to take a step back and be like, wait, why is that? Why did they say it like that? Why is this character treated this way? So I think it's very
Yeah.
important.
Um, yeah, it's that is bad, but like
Mhm.
it's not even something that's necessarily ever went away. It's just like
Mhm.
evolved.
Right. They
I
got smarter with the messaging.
thank you. Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
glad you mentioned the wellness aspect because like if you really listening, you can hear the words in between what they're saying. You can hear that hidden language like cleanses,
Mhm.
detoxes, that kind of thing. Like you start hearing that stuff, you're like, but what do you mean by that? So you really have to constantly be critiquing and analyzing what you hear and what you see, because they'll hide it behind certain language, but the message is still always there. It's still always the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And even so, something I think about a lot is how I would have felt very differently about my sexuality if there was a lot more queer representation in media, for example. So I'm curious about how, how that would have affected you as well, and like how that would impact your queer journey, and maybe if there's any media representation that you saw that did help you along the way.
So I would say, yeah, I'm on the same page with you where like if I saw it more, it would have been just normal to me. Especially if we're talking about black queer representation. It's still there, right? In the early aughts, I remember Set It Off had Queen Latifah and her lovely girlfriend in it, even though her girlfriend didn't say a single word. That was very weird. But that
Oh,
was still
true.
right. That was still her girl. And I remember it's one of the early examples I saw of like, black queer love. And I was just like, I never seen this before. And it is tough for us to get that kind of thing to screen because, powers that be when it comes to like producing or funding, like they make sure that it's nearly impossible to get that stuff to screen. I remember, I think it's F. Gary Grace who directed that film, and I don't remember the exact budget he got for it because I'd have to look it up. But to me, it was like the equivalent of like $3 and a paper clip. Like he did not get much money for that film, so that's kind of the thing that creators like. Those are the obstacles we have to face to get that kind of stuff to screen. Um, but yeah, I just think that yeah, I definitely things might have been different for me. I might have, like you mentioned, come into my sexuality much sooner if I had known better and I had seen more of it.
Mhm.
I talk about that a little in the book where I'm just like, it wasn't, especially when I'm talking about black queer people, it's not something I saw as much.
Right.
So
Yeah, and I feel like the
yeah,
queer representation, like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I said, and I understand it too. There's a risk to being out like that. So
Yeah, no, there's definitely a risk, but I feel like a lot of the representation we saw was like pitting bisexual people as like finicky, or they're slutty, or they're like dating multiple people at once, and it wasn't ever like something that was actually relatable. But I want to take a little bit of a step back. I meant to ask you much earlier. We're now 20 minutes into the episode, but Clarkisha, what is your most bisexual behavior?
my most bisexual behavior. Honestly, it's probably how I feel about certain couples. I would say off the rip, Daniel Craig and Rachel Weisz. Like, I am definitely trying to be a third up in there. I am. I'm trying to slip
Oh,
right up in there, and be like,
mhm.
hey,
I mean,
what's going
that's a beautiful couple. Like,
There's also was it Tiana Taylor and her husband Amani Schubert. I'm trying to be up in there too. I'm trying to be up in
mm,
there too. Like, hey girl, what's up? So that's what I would say. Like, I definitely have some couples in my head where I'm like, if they ask me, I would definitely say yes. And my stance right now is a fuck no in general because people are weird, but them too. Yes, I would be
there are
like,
exceptions.
yes, I'd be like, for one night, I'll do it.
Exactly. Just something to write in your next memoir for sure.
Right. I'd be like, yeah, it's a good night.
So, Clarkisha, something you talked about in your book as well is having girl crushes, which is like, as soon as I read that, I was like, oh my God, that was like, with my friends, I was like, ooh, I really have a girl crush on her. And I feel like that's like the equivalent of a guy saying, oh, I
No
want to hug
homo.
you. No homo. No homo, though.
Yeah, no homo, no homo.
It's like the equivalent for sure. And I'm like curious, so because what you're talking about is saying like you have a girl crush kind of eliminates you feeling like, oh my God, that was a gay feeling I just had. So
Yeah.
if you want to talk about that a little bit more and like how that affected you like into your queerness.
Yeah, so them early 2000s, as we know, was rough. It's rough on everybody.
Oh my God.
Fashion, especially, it was weird out here. So, for me, to kind of find this middle ground between clearly like my higher self realizing I'm fucking gay versus like me growing up in this oppressive, Christian household. Using that term and terminology, girl crush, was really helpful in terms of carving out that space to kind of let my attractions fly, right? So,
Mhm.
as problematic as the word will probably be today, I think it was important in that moment in time for those of us who were struggling to get to those points, to find the actual verbiage, to exercise some sort of um, gender free, like freedom in terms of gender expression or sexuality. So
Mhm.
that's why I'm like, I'm not, I would never demonize that term. 'Cause I'm like, it let me do what I need to do at the time,
So
to
true.
really, yeah, to really start to flex the muscle that is, freeing myself from these gender essentialist notions of, being, just existing.
Mhm. For sure. I wonder all those people that I talked to about my girl crushes and their girl crushes where they are now and if they ever realized that they were queer.
Right. I wonder that a lot too. Like, did she know that she was bisexual? I don't know. If I see her again, I might ask. Like, I don't know. Did she
I'm
know? Yeah.
still waiting for my high school friends to admit that they're queer, but one day we'll see.
Yeah.
But
Baby step.
so now that you're growing into your queerness and you're now entering queer spaces. So I'm curious about, what is your experience like being in queer spaces? Do you still feel like well, for example, one thing I've noticed kind of as I've come out and come to terms with bisexuality and gone into more queer spaces is that it's very whitewashed in that I feel like
Absolutely.
there's a lot of people that since they're marginalized in a smaller way that kind of makes them feel like they can relate to everyone, right? Or like they don't realize that their spaces aren't necessarily safe still to everyone, even if it's a
Yeah.
queer space. Do you
Exactly.
feel
Yeah.
like that's something that you experience? Do you feel like within the queer community there's still a lot of fat phobia?
Yeah, definitely lots of fat phobia, lots of colorism too. I mentioned that in my book, but it was, for me, it made dating as a queer Black woman definitely an extreme sport. So then it turned into where I had to like limit myself. I had to limit myself and my own options to protect myself from certain people, especially fetishists. I don't remember, but there's a word my trans girlfriend uses that's just so accurate to like people who just like prey on more marginalized people, just like watching and trying to pluck them from the greater herd. It's really weird. But yeah, I would say because of things like that, I've kind of stuck to like a Black queer crowd because
Yeah.
we're kind of the only ones who understand each other and what it's like to kind of move through the world, and have people be really weird about your sexuality, because people already have a very strange, especially they're not Black, right, very strange
Mhm.
relationship to our Blackness. So by proxy they're gonna not comprehend how we do queer, so
Right. It's a very different queer and it's not like I can't relate to your queer experience because mine is very different at the end of the day and I feel like people don't like think about that and they just
they don't want to, it's a lot,
right.
they want to kind of flatten our differences, which I always think, once again, is a lazy way to do solidarity. You don't have to flatten it. We are
Mhm.
different and we can still
Yeah.
have like common goals. Like, I don't understand why people want other people to be as homogenous as they are, but that's again
Right.
discussion for another day.
But But I feel like that's the beauty of our community, is that people have very different experiences, but we're all kind of here together. We're all queer, and that like all these different experiences is what makes us such a vibrant community. And I think like people, focus on, I don't know, kind of condensing that experience into one
Yes.
palatable thing
Condensing is a very
for the
good word. Yep.
straights.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very good word.
Yeah. So yeah, I was curious about how that like affects you and whatnot. But one other thing you talk a lot about in your book is healing. I mean, it must have been really tough writing your own story and kind of re-exposing yourself to those things that you went through. So what kind of ways did you have to like take care of yourself as you're writing your own story?
So I've been saying on every like show I've appeared on, I'll say it again here. It was very important for me at the time to have a therapist and psychiatrist on deck as I went through this process. I was very, very lucky, very blessed to have the money at the time to afford these things, right? Which is why it should all be free. Okay,
No,
free
seriously,
healthcare for everybody, free healthcare for everybody. Like we should have to pay shit.
I'm very pro
Anyways,
that.
at that point, I had a psychiatrist, I had a psychologist. So when I got through a very like harrowing or traumatic chapter, I would just hop on the phone. I'm like, hey girl, so you got space on your schedule this week? Like, if not this week, then next week. So that's kind of how I did it. And then I would, essentially take that chapter to my psychiatrist or psychologist, and we would talk.
Mhm.
And then I would put it to bed, and then, and then write the next chapter or segment. But it was very important for me to like surround myself with mental health professionals at the time. Because, I
Definitely.
had to do some deep diving and a lot of it was dark. So
Mhm.
I'm very, very thankful that I was able to again afford that at the time.
That's so great. And did you have like trouble finding the right therapist for you? I feel like a lot of people that I've
Absolutely.
spoken to struggle finding like someone who
Absolutely.
relates to their experience.
Absolutely. The way this country's set up is the fucking Ponzi scheme, and the Ponzi scheme is just also all paperwork. So it's weird because even if you do have insurance, like they funnel you into these like terrible doctors in their offices. And a lot of these doctors are concerned with just like the bottom line. And sometimes you can't blame them because of how the healthcare system is set up. That said, they're not blameless, right? So
Right.
um, yeah, so it's just weird in that, they'll be like, oh, this is your primary care doctor, and they'll do the referral for you. And I'm like, no. So obviously it cost me more money to say fuck that. But I definitely had to be on the hunt. Like I was on the Psychology Today page, just searching by my location or the next city over, looking at their rates per hour, looking at their specialties. Like people kind of gloss over that, but that's important. Like if a doctor is telling you, hey, I don't do people with personality disorders, you gotta respect that. You can't come up in there and then be mad at them that they can't help you. They said that
Right.
in their bio. You do have to read those things, right?
Yeah, it's
So
not beneficial for anyone to try.
right. So yeah, so you have to look at those things, then you have to cross check with where they are, race too, right? People like they don't like to mention that, but race. I looked for a black therapist and
Of
psychiatrist.
course.
So race, gender, then also if you care about religion, you gotta look into that. Obviously I had to find someone who fuck with gay people because I'm not finna be in your office if you homophobic as fuck. That's weird. Homophobic or transphobic. I don't wanna be looking at you.
Yeah, no,
So
thank you.
yeah, it was tough. It was tough, and because how tough it is, and the fact that it's not free, a lot of people they're not built for it. They're like, it was too tiring, and I'm like, I understand. It's a process. You can't just log in and be like, I'll pick that one. No, you have to really go at it. And then I also had, I shared it I think a year or two ago, and I have to find it. But I also had criteria even for my black therapist. So I'd be like, okay, it's great that I found, a black therapist, but let's hear your politics. So there were like certain questions I would ask again about sexuality, about for me, colorism and texturism, because that's important to me. I'm not sitting in your office if you're a colorist because you are automatically not going to understand the events that have transpired in my life. So I
Yeah,
asked about
absolutely.
that. And then I asked about a host of other things, but I even had criteria for them. So even when you think you found your person, you still have to be like, okay, so what do you think about this? Because again, if they're not even prepared for those little questions, then it's not worth sitting in their office and then getting traumatized by them. Because that happens too. Like you do the right
Yeah.
thing, you look for therapists, whatever. Then you get into their office and they just acted crazy to you. Now you're traumatized. Now you're traumatized. You want to go back.
Right.
So my sister had a thing where like she had again successfully found a therapist, but like she asked like one or two questions and like the therapist like tweaked on her like she
Ooh.
because she couldn't answer those questions in a way that was thoughtful and intelligent. Then she got wild with my sister, and my sister's like, you know what, I'm actually glad I asked you this because it's told me everything I need to know. If you can't handle this simple question, you're not going to be able to handle half of the trauma I bring to your office. So she managed to avert that. But like imagine all the people who they run into that and then don't know how to you know kind of navigate afterwards. So yeah,
Absolutely.
it was tough. It was tough. It's very tough.
I can imagine it's also, I feel like that's why it's so important to kind of look at it in a preventative way, because I feel like if you're in crisis, like it's going to be so hard to go through all of that. I think when
Yes.
I first started going to a therapist, I was like deep in an eating disorder and literally would just take whatever I could get. And the person I got was like great at the time. But when I was starting to come out and like was talking about, coming out while I was in, with a man in a hetero relationship and he wasn't
Yeah.
like necessarily super accepting of it. And like, my therapist just didn't really know how to handle that, and I think she tried her best in the moment, but that's why it's so important to find the right person. I just feel like it makes it so inaccessible to a lot of people, which is so
Yes.
unfortunate.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
have any like recommendations for, say, if someone can't afford therapy, what other ways can they work on kind of protecting themselves or healing any kind of trauma?
I would say, and a lot of people they're not gonna like this because it's gonna require some self-awareness. You need to talk to your community. And when I say community, your immediate community, which is your friends slash support system. Now, obviously, I'm gonna put an asterisk next to it because sometimes we have friends that enable us and are good for us. So
For
when I'm
sure.
saying this, y'all have to take that into consideration. But if you're in a situation and you're blessed enough to have friends that you respect who aren't on any bullshit, then you're gonna have to ask them because sometimes when you're in the shit, you can't see it, right? So a fish is in the water. They don't know they're out of the water. If you take them out of the water, then they're like, oh shit, I'm not in the water anymore. So you have to really be paying attention, right? So I would ask, your friends and be like, hey, are there some things, or maybe I'll use this example. Are there some coping mechanisms of mine that you think may be concerning? Like if you really want to start doing some like healing work, you're gonna have to start asking some hard questions because guess what? Who the people who you would usually ask this or who would ask you, the therapists, right now aren't accessible. So, ask that friend that you do really fuck with, that you do really trust, like, hey girl, like now no bullshit. Is this a thing I need to be working on? If they love you and respect you, they will tell you so. Sometimes, again, if you're around people who enable you, they won't. So you have to consider that. But if you know someone you trust who will be real with you, then I would start there. After that, then I would look into. I hate saying self help books, but some of these books out there do fall under the category. I would say I think what was it? It's like I don't remember the exact title, but it's a book for like the children of emotionally immature parents. I think that's part of the title.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
I know what you're talking about.
yeah,
Yeah, I've heard that
so
that's a great book.
yeah, that's a good book. Now the author of this other book is I apparently found out later was Demon Spawn. So obviously take this with a grain of salt, everybody. But I think The Body Keeps the Score is another important one. But once again, asterisk because what I've read recently is that some of the things discussed in those books, the conclusions that they came to while correct, like the methodology that was used to get there was not kosher. So I recommend
Oh, I
people
see.
kind of I recommend people kind of beware of that. But that said,
Gotcha.
it's an important book. So those are the
Yeah.
two I recommend. But also, like I mentioned, start asking the people that you really fuck with whether, there's some stuff that you need to address, not just maybe in that particular relationship, but with yourself too.
Yeah, and like a true friend will really be honest with you,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, that they'll want to help you, so they will be willing to be honest. But do you feel like writing your book was part of like helping healing your inner child? I've been hearing that term a lot lately, and I feel like it actually is so meaningful. And I also feel like it is a part of healing trauma, is like healing your inner child. And so yeah, how does that come into play with writing your book?
I mean, yeah, it's important. People operate from their trauma and they were traumatized what as children. Like, of course that's gonna come
Hmm.
into play. But yeah,
Right.
writing my book definitely helped. I will say that I process via writing. The way
Mhm.
I illustrated in an interview yesterday, I was like, let's say you're in my head and you got idea A and idea B, right? Clearly to the outside, to you, the outside person, these ideas are connected, but I'm not gonna realize that until I start writing. So then when I start writing,
Mhm.
I'm like, oh shit, these are connected. But that doesn't happen until I sit down at my computer, start typing, or I get a pen and pen pencil, start writing. So for
Mhm.
me, writing the memoir was helpful in that it connected a lot of dots in terms of like where my family was concerned, and
Mhm.
and my role in those dots, because I showed up at a very peculiar time for my family, and literally as I was born, a lot of things went left, a lot of things were
Mhm.
revealed, a lot, like the
Right.
whole like like a effect that happened. So I would say it was important for that reason, but also important in terms of figuring out some of the coping mechanisms I had to really address within myself. So yeah, it was very, very self-reflective, and I'm that much more better for it.
That's awesome. And I could even like tell in your writing, just like because you kind of like trickle in some humor in your writing. And I think that's like obviously just the style of your writing in general, and just like kind of how you handle going through those tough topics. But I felt like that was kind of part of your healing in a way, or just that's how I interpreted it. But do you find that like humor is kind of like your best way of moving past something that was hard?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I feel like if I get to the point where I'm joking about something, then I'm like, okay, I may not be in the best place still about it, but now I'm in a place in my brain where I'm prepared to at least deconstruct. Because to be really funny, you have to be really smart and really,
Mhm.
you have a deft hand when it comes to deconstruction. 'Cause,
Right.
a lot of, if you think about some of the funniest people ever are out there, and then you start looking at their biographies and their life stories, them shits are sad. But again, they've like been able to channel, what should have been in like a vortex of sadness, right? Into these their lively performances or their lively routines. So yeah, I think humor is one of the things about life that like really help you get through. I feel that way about food. I'm a tourist. Shout out to us. And I feel that way about like things like sex, but also music. Like there are things in this life that really kind of help you. Like they push you to action when you really don't want to. Really don't want to continue. So
For sure. What's I'm a big music buff. What's your on your playlist right now?
on my playlist right now is Half Alive. I love their band. Was introduced to me by one of my good friends. I think their album that just came out recently is called Conditions of a Punk. And I love that album. I've been playing it nonstop. My sister is sick, like she's sick of me. Like she really sick of me. She's like, bro, please listen to something else. And I'm like, no. So
Okay, I'm gonna check them out.
I love their new album. I think my it's hard to pick like favorite songs on it too. But I'll say two of my favorites is like obviously the lead song, which is named after the album Conditions of a Punk. I really love it. It starts out really, it starts out really cute with the piano, and then like the riffs of the guitar come in and the beat
Ooh,
drops, and I'm
yes.
like, oh, I love that. And then the second one is I think it's called Nobody. And I already love this song because the way it's composed is really nice. Like I like some good like tunage, some good auto tune, like as long as it doesn't overpower everything. But I really like the song because it kind of illustrated my stance on like liking things, right? The lead artist is like, just because I like it doesn't make it right. And I was like, thank you. What I've been saying my whole life. I was like, he just says it in one line, and I'm just like, oh my god, like someone gets it. So yeah,
Somebody's got to
it's
say
just,
it.
yeah, he just said it, and he just, sang it, but but I love their work. I think they released the album while I was still in California. I think it was like 2018, 2019. I don't remember the name of the album, but one of the songs off that album was Runaway. Just an amazing song. I love that so much. Y'all need to go listen to them. Give them some streams, okay?
Oh my
Love
gosh,
me a good
I'm
indie band.
sold.
Yeah, great band. Great band,
Amazing. So what's next for you, Clarkisha?
What is next? Obviously I'm gonna, be doing some more interviews and going to more festivals and some more like live book events. And what else? So eventually, when things calm down, I will look into, depending on what happens. I have a friend she's been, eyeballing me. She's like, listen, so we got to put some presentations together for some adaptation ideas. And I'm like, okay, later though, not right now, I'm not ready. So, she'd be like right here in my ears, like, so are you gonna? And I'm like, I don't know yet. We don't know. So that's a possibility. Another thing is that I definitely want to start working on my Western. I've been trying to
Yes.
finish that thing since 2015. And I want to finish it. Like, she just been looking at me in my Dropbox like, bitch, you gonna come back? And I'm like, yes, I promise. But yeah, I will definitely be hyper focused on that because it's just something I want to do for a while, but also like I've since from a young age I wanted to do fiction. I love the memoir. I appreciate it, but I'm like, I want to go to these other genres that I've loved for like ever. So definitely want to do the Western. It is going to be definitely an undertaking because it's going to require a lot of research because it takes place during the Reconstruction era. People don't.
And that's where the interview cut off. But you can learn more about Clarkisha and buy her book at clarkishakent.com. You can also follow her on Instagram at clarkishakent and on Twitter at iwriteallday_. And she's really big on Twitter and really funny. So you should follow her, read her book, see all her content, buy her book. I think that a lot of you will really enjoy reading it. But as I mentioned, next, I really want to share a really heartfelt story from one of my listeners, Danny. He told me about his coming out journey and his struggle with his gay father, who was not very supportive. And I'm sharing this because, again, I think it really gives a good perspective on what homophobia and biphobia can really look like, how religion can play a role in someone's life in their coming out journey. And I actually have some previous episodes, two specifically, that talk about people who grown up religious or they maybe still are religious and how that kind of plays into their sexuality. But it's a really interesting topic. I'm not someone who necessarily grew up as religious, but again, I think it's just really something that's important to learn and hear from others. So this story is called I Came Out to Everyone Except My Gay Father. I am a 24-year-old Mormon from Utah, and in December last year, I came out to my wife and family that I am bisexual. I'm very lucky to have a bisexual wife and 3 gay little sisters, so my family has been very supportive and accepting. But I told all of them that my father isn't allowed to know. He grew up closeted in the very religious culture of Utah and felt the need to play straight in order to fit in. I have a lot of sympathy for him and what he's gone through. He came out to me and my siblings in 2016, and when he did, I felt a lot of comfort knowing he might know how I feel and how to help me. He later told us that he and my mom planned to separate on good terms after my sister was done with high school. This came to a shock, but I understood that what he was going through and tried to be supportive of their decision no matter how much it hurt. In 2017, I tried to come out to him as being bisexual. But before I could, he revealed to me the feelings he had about bisexuality, not knowing that he was talking about me. He told me that he believed that bisexuality wasn't a real thing, and that it was just something that people said when they wanted to pretend they were gay or feminist. In his mind, you had to be gay or straight with no in between. This shocked me that he felt that way and destroyed any confidence I had that my feelings were valid and that I could be accepted. I felt like I was pushed back into the closet. After that, I left to serve a religious mission in Chicago and tried to fit in. While I was there, I had the chance to live close to Boys Town in Chicago and met some amazing people in the LGBT community. Once I got home, I started working with my father in his business. This was the first time owning a business, and we tried to figure it out together, with the idea that he could retire eventually and I'd take over. We spent a lot of time together then. Over the next year, during quarantine, my sisters came out as bi or lesbian. I was so happy for them and comforted by how my mom and other siblings took it. But in private, my father revealed his feelings, that he thought they were just looking for attention or to be edgy. He said he didn't really believe that women could be gay, that they just hated men. Once again, I felt pushed back into the closet before I had the chance. It was around then that I met my now wife. She's an amazing woman who is open-minded and welcoming. She was so excited to meet my sisters and was the first woman I dated who wasn't confused or worried at the idea of being around them. After we started to fall in love, she told me that she's bisexual. It was incredible to me that I had found someone who could understand me, but my nerves prevented me from coming out to her. My father's influence was still there, and I thought that if I came out, I would somehow diminish her coming out. So I said nothing. Within a year, we married. We had an apartment and adopted a cat, and pride flags hung proudly in our home. About a year later, my siblings and I found out my father was cheating on my mom, and had been for years, even before they planned on separating. He was meeting up with several men a week, doing drugs, getting drunk, and having sex with strangers every chance he got. I found out that one of the men he was having an affair with was my coworker, a man he had claimed to never be attracted to. I felt betrayed and used. While I was working hard to make his company a success, he was sneaking off to have sex with a coworker many times a week. I decided that I couldn't work with them knowing that. I got a new job working in a mental health facility instead. I made the decision that I wasn't going to let my father's narcissistic personality stop me from coming out any longer, and I finally came out to my wife, who enthusiastically accepted it. I came out to each of my siblings who accepted me, but I decided I would not come out to my father. I will not tell him because we don't have that kind of relationship anymore. I still see him sometimes and we talk, but he's just the man living in my mom's house, my former employer, and I don't feel I need to confide in him anymore. Thank you to Danny for sharing this incredible story. I'm so happy to hear that you've come out to your wife and family members and that they're supportive. And I think it's a powerful message that, biphobia can come from all sides, and internalized homophobia is really a bitch. From reading his story, I got a sense that there's a lot of patriarchal issues as well, believing that, women can't be gay, that it's just because they hate men, and it just implies that men are the superior gender. And it's heartbreaking to hear that you can't really feel valid or confide in your own family member. But I wanted to share this with listeners because I felt like feeling valid is such a hard thing as a bisexual person, because you're getting told from all these different directions that it's not possible to like multiple genders, and that, that you're just doing it for attention. I think that that's something that a lot of us experience. I know, for example, I probably didn't come out for most of my 20s because I felt like, because I dated men, that I wasn't really queer and that I wasn't queer enough to really be bi, which I know now doesn't make any sense, but it's really stuck in a lot of people's minds. And I'm hoping that sharing this story will help people see that, no matter how your family takes it, no matter what they feel about bisexuality, that you're still valid. But thank you again to Danny for sharing. It's really inspiring to hear your story. All right, everyone, thank you so much for listening. I'm so excited for the next episode as well. In the meantime, please subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and please, please, please give us a rating and review. That's one of the things that really helps the algorithm, and I would really love to hear from you. I'm going to just keep asking, please, please, please review bisexual behavior. You can also follow us on Instagram at bisexualbehavior, and if you want to follow me, I'm at talia.tatiana. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok. But thank you again for listening. Your support means everything, and we'll see you back. It's going to be a little bit earlier than a month, but we'll get you more details soon, and we'll see you next time. Okay, bye!